This is Joe Handley, social work lecturer at the Open University, and this video is going to explore the top 10 most connected organisations in children's services and education in England today. So this is based on a mapping exercise completed by me and some really great colleagues across the UK. For full details on that map, please check it out in the description below. So on with the list. In at number 10 is the Education Endowment Foundation, a relatively recent charity, as are many of the organisations on this list, showing how marginalized large established charities have become, replaced by these new, often government initiated and government influenced charities. So, for example, the EEF was initiated by Michael Gove, who shows up a lot in the histories of these organizations. And again, like many of the orgs on this list, the EEF was founded based on similar initiatives seen in the USA, not usually seen as kind of the paragon of educational excellence in the world. The EEF has a remit around improving educational attainment for children in England. It's got a pretty huge influence in financial terms, including a number of international partnerships. Some of its most recent work has been around the National Tutoring Programme, which hasn't exactly gone great. EEF is part of the What Works network, whose members make up a lot of the organizations in the map. And it's a network basically funded or focused on funding and undertaking research based on the premise that we can come up with this binary conclusion that some things work and some things don't. And like all the organizations on this list, there's a large amount of overlap between the individuals involved in the EEF and other organizations that are influential in children's services and education. You've got the EEF's advisory board and board of trustees have representatives including, or have included, or currently include, Teach First, ARC, Brilliant Club, Sutton Trust, Impetus, as well as the Boston Consulting Group, who again show up a lot in the stories of these organizations. And that's the real issue with the way these networks work. They're insular, the same people and organizations involved all throughout the system, people moving between organizations, carrying ideas, limiting challenge and variety of thought.
I think it's a good idea, and I'm standby.
And then coming in at number 9 is the Cabinet Office. So one of only 2 government departments that we actually included in the map. The next one will be coming up, a spoiler. We will likely map other government departments in later maps, but it was clear that the 2 we included were by far the most influential in children's services and education. So the Cabinet Office exercises a lot of control in children's services and education through its coordinating role of the aforementioned What Works network. So this places a substantial amount of research funding in this area and elsewhere under the fairly direct control of the Cabinet. So yeah, you wonder why research from these organizations isn't more challenging of the government, put that together. And then you just have a lot of overlap with people moving between the Cabinet Office and these other influential organizations. So just picking some examples, Jack Feintuck, Deputy Director of the Prime Minister's Implementation Unit within the Cabinet Office, is also a trustee of What Works for Children's Social Care, a member of the What Works network, who may be coming up on this list. And then, of course, you have high-profile individuals, just for example, David Laws, former Minister of State at the Cabinet Office, and he's been involved with ARC, Education Policy Institute. There's many other examples, but just one last one, because it's such a good segue into number 8 on this list, is Christine Megson, who was formerly part of the public service redesign at the Cabinet Office and is now a trustee at The Difference. So yeah, in at number 8 is The Difference. Maybe a bit of a surprise here, with The Difference being a charity launched only in 2018. I think, though, The Difference really shows the power of networks in action and how they can take a new, relatively unknown organization and propel it to prominence so quickly. And The Difference definitely know how to network. Check out their supporters page. You getting an idea of why they're so high on this list? The Difference provides senior leadership courses to school leaders. That's kind of their remit, as well as undertaking its own research, which most of these organizations, they kind of start off with one remit and then branch off into others, often research. And speaking of ideas that proliferate around this network unchallenged, there seems to be this general belief that if you just give enough leaders enough leadership training, whatever the cost in terms of public funds being taken from elsewhere, that will somehow solve the problem in children's services and education. So yeah, The Difference can be seen as kind of a symptom of that. And yeah, current and former board members of The Difference include highly connected individuals in the map as well, including CEO of Pause, Sophie Humphreys, Josh McAllister, who's currently leading the Children's Social Care Review, And then the CEO of the difference, Kieran Gill, is a former policy advisor at Teach First. So in at number 7, we have What Works for Children's Social Care, another relatively new organization and part of the What Works network. So What Works for Children's Social Care only actually became independent of the Department for Education in 2020. And obviously being part of the What Works network, it still is under that Cabinet Office umbrella. So with that level of government connection, you'd be shocked at how much overlap there is between those involved in What Works for Children's Social Care and a number of high-profile ongoing reviews into children's social care in England at the moment, including the Independent Review of Children's Social Care, which is chaired by Josh McAllister, who was mentioned in relation to the difference and will be coming up again. And he was actually contractually obligated by the Department for Education to work with What Works for Children's Social Care. And the Department for Education had just granted What Works for Children's Social Care its independence.
And in at number 6 is the Fair Education Alliance, so a charity with the stated goal to reduce inequality in the education system, and which is just kind of like an alliance of many or most of the big players in this map, in particular in education. But primarily, there's just so much influence from Teach First here. So, like, their board includes the current CEO of Teach First, as well as the founder and honorary president of Teach First. The current CEO of the Fair Education Alliance is also the former head of school partnerships at Teach First. And yeah, the organizations that make up this alliance include, we're about to go into the top 5 organizations, but 3 of the top 5 organizations that are still yet to come are part of this alliance, as well as the already discussed The Difference, and then just loads of other big organizations that are connected in the map, like Bernardo's, the Brilliant Club, Nesta, Tudor Trust, Social Finance, and then of course loads of financial organizations like EY, KPMG, Credit Suisse. Because, what would a coalition to tackle inequality in education be without some of the most scandal and corruption riddled private financial interests in society today? Wouldn't be. In at number 5, so now, these are the big boys. Leading off the top 5, we have the Ambition Institute. I don't think this one or the next one will be particularly surprising to anyone working in education today. So the Ambition Institute is another very recent organization, but this one was a merger of 2 large existing organizations. And actually one of those organizations was the merger of 2 other organizations only a few years earlier. The idea behind these organizations stems once again from America. So the Now Leaders organization, and once again copying the USA. Andrew Adonis was involved, and actually he's been a big Andrew Adonis, former Labour minister. He's been a big supporter or heavily involved in a lot of the organizations, and he gets actually his own little plot on the map that's worth looking at. So as we get into these big organizations with so many connections, it's actually quite difficult to know what to focus on for a short video like this. So please review the map, but some big ones are like Rachel D'Souza, former director of Ambition Institute. She's now the Children's Commissioner for England. Matt Hood is the former CEO of the Ambition Institute, the man who managed to set up Oak National Academy using only a WhatsApp group. Oh, and of course, a little bit of networked access to some of the most influential people in education today. The former director of the Ambition Institute, Russell Hobby, is now CEO of Teach First. They're part of the Fair Education Alliance. So yeah, big dogs, like I said. Directly leading on from the Ambition Institute is number 4, ARC, who were original supporters of all 3 organizations that eventually went on to form the Ambition Institute. They're a supporter of The Difference, and they were also involved in initially funding and incubating the next organization on our list that we're about to come to, and I won't spoil just yet. And ARC were also involved in the founding of Oak National Academy. There's lots of overlap between former and current ARC staff and other organizations as well in the map. And yet, even more so than the Ambition Institute, ARC are just everywhere, included internationally, as are those who have worked with them or for them in the past. So you've got like Amanda Spielman, Ofsted Chief Inspector. She was one of the founding members of ARC. Oh, and the previous Chief Inspector of Ofsted that she replaced was actually a former Director of Education at ARC too. So, replacing like for like there.
Top 3.
So getting into the top 3, we have Frontline, a fast-track social work training provider that was founded in 2013. And like most organizations on this list, being relatively new, but being favored by important people in politics and in the financial world, it's rapidly expanded in both its size and its remit. Frontline has started to refer to itself actually as, quote, the largest social work charity in England. And that's something that our findings would certainly back up. This is another one where Gove and Adonis were heavily involved in the finding of Frontline, or the founding of Frontline. And the founder and long-term CEO, Josh McAllister, and yes, this is the same Josh McAllister discussed a couple of times earlier, who's now leading the independent care review. Well, he talks about how he bunked off from his new teaching job to meet Gove and Adonis in a cross-party meeting behind the scenes to found Frontline. I've covered Frontline links in other videos linked in the description and in some earlier mapping specifically on Frontline, so I won't go into that all here. But really, they've just had such a damaging impact on the profession in so many ways, and the government just glosses over their constant failures. Coming in at number 2 is the Department for Education. Now, you might expect that the Department for Education would be number 1 in this list, but amazingly, our number 1 actually beats them out. A lot of the Department for Education's connections come from the fact that they're the main funders for most of the organizations in the map and on this list. But also so many individuals from the Department for Education, they have or they move into influential positions in these organizations, or they move out of these organizations into influential positions in the Department for Education. Before going on to the top 1, here are some honorable mentions, that fell just outside the top 10. So the Oak National Academy, Price Waterhouse Coopers, PwC, Now Teach. And so moving on to the top 1 on this list, the most connected organization in children's services and education is Teach First. Probably not that big of a surprise. I've mentioned them quite a few times in this video already, and amazingly, they're more connected than the Department for Education. So Teach First is another charity that borrows its model from the USA, this time from Teach for America. The influence of Teach First is really astounding and needs to be explored in the map to really appreciate just how influential those who have previously trained through or worked for Teach First have been and are currently, and how they've propagated particular ideas about teaching and youth services or children's services. So like even just looking at the top 3 on our list, Frontline, number 3, Teach First's fast track teaching model was the inspiration for Frontline, and they remain partnered with Frontline through the Transform Society. Josh McAllister, founder of Frontline, was also a former Teach First trainee, and the government just loved Teach First, probably because so many of their advisors were trained or worked there. And therefore, unsurprisingly, Teach First are also a financial powerhouse. In 2021 alone, they had their program contract extended, so to the tune of 113 million, while also they were shared providers on 9 other contracts valued anywhere from 1.2 million to 250 million. So yeah, and they also have one hell of a list of supporters, including financial backers, that's really just worth looking at on its own. So just some concluding points about these organizations. There's probably some big missing names of organizations that you might think of that have been supporting children for decades and have really been muscled out of those influential positions. They have a lot of influence on government reviews, including the Care Review and the Initial Teacher Training Market Review, that are both actually included in the map to demonstrate just this, the influence that networks have over these reviews. And these organizations always do quite well out of these reviews, not surprisingly. The organizations in this list and the map, they all tend to promote each other, collaborate on projects, speak at each other's events, share resources, really making this kind of one big self-sustaining organization monopoly. That's the top 10 organizations. Keep an eye out for updates. I plan to do a top 10 individuals after this, which will have some interesting surprises, I think, and also some not so surprising. And the map is far from complete. We hope to update it soon. We already have a list of hundreds of new connections to include, many provided by people who reviewed the map and identified gaps, which has been really great. And we still welcome suggestions. Check out the website for how to do that. So also just subscribe to keep updated, share this video and the map in general, comment, like on this video if you think that it's been valuable. That would be really great because these things, they take a bit of time. Thank you so much.